Okay, let's get this over with nice and early. CM Punk is not on this list. Now, that's not because we don't want to see him back, because, let's face it, we definitely do. But no matter how much the universe would accept a Punk return, the plethora of legal issues between him and the company feel too great at the moment for that to materialise. Not to mention the fact that he's also just about to begin his career into the world of MMA commentary with Cage Fury Fighting Championships. But while this list may not have any chick magnets, what it does have are a collection of other wrestlers who perhaps have some unfinished business with WWE, as well as a hunger and an interest to actually do something about it. I'm Adam Nicholas from WhatCulture Wrestling, and this is 10 former WWE stars who deserve another shot. Number 10, Rich Swann. Last year, Rich Swann parted ways with WWE amidst domestic abuse allegations that had been made against the former Cruiserweight champion. Despite the case being dropped and Swann protesting his innocence throughout, WWE have a zero-tolerance policy for domestic abuse cases, and it seemed to be enough of a negative situation that the company sought to distance themselves from Swann and the allegations. As a result, Swann almost retired from wrestling entirely following the ordeal, but after some time away to reflect and move past the whole situation, the former 205 Live star returned to wrestling, signed with Impact, and is currently tearing it up as their X Division champion. Swann's had a new lease of life since his return, and when he's producing the kind of quality we saw from him during his time in NXT, the Cruiserweight Classic, and 205 Live, you can't help but think he'd have so much more to offer a second time around. Number 9, Kaitlyn. Things are a lot different now in WWE than they were when Kaitlyn first arrived in the company back in 2010. Originally a well-muscled bodybuilder given a generic romance angle with Big E, and the tide was already turning towards the women's revolution, albeit fairly slowly. On top of that, Kaitlyn had joined the company during the early, laughable days of NXT, and that stigma was one that proved to be a hindrance when it came to being taken seriously by the WWE universe. Fast forward, and the landscape for women's wrestling has improved dramatically, and Kaitlyn got her first taste of that change during the second installment of the Mae Young Classic last year. And during her time away from wrestling, Kaitlyn's also managed to show her entrepreneurial skills, launching her own fitness clothing company and acting as a spokesperson for her husband's nutrition group. And coupling that with the proof that she can still go between the ropes, she feels like a much more complete prospect that WWE would be very interested in. Whether it would be adding to the NXT women's division or having another spell on the main roster, a second run with a few notable matches against competitors from any of the incredibly talented women's rosters would be enough to right the wrongs of Kaitlyn's previous run with the company. Number 8, Tenille Dashwood. A woman who was horrendously misused during her previous 6 years in WWE, Tenille Dashwood was repeatedly overlooked in favour of others during her time as Emma, and found herself stuck in comedy spots and treated as a glorified jobber to the stars. After a while, fans became conditioned not to care about her matches, which is a real shame for a wrestler as talented as Dashwood is. It's a talent she's since proven with her work in Ring of Honor, despite the fact that it's been slightly limited due to injury, and at the age of 29, you feel she still has plenty more to offer if she can keep herself injury-free. As Emma in WWE, Dashwood was doomed to spin her wheels throughout her tenure, and let's not even get started with the whole Emelina shenanigans. But with all that said, there must be a part of the Australian that would love to return one day and show what she can really do in the promotion when used properly. Number 7, Trent Barreta. Hey look, it's one half of the Dude Busters. Remember them? Now you've got a feel for Trent Barreta and Caelan Croft with this one, because who on earth is pitching the Dude Busters in WWE Creative and thinking that that's a solid idea? Well, it's probably the same person who thought that putting them in a feud with Kurt Hawkins and Vance Archer on Superstars was the key to stardom. Spoiler alert, it wasn't, and the experience was so bad that it actually led to Caelan Croft retiring from professional wrestling altogether. But from the rubble of that tag team turned enhancement talent nightmare, Trent Barreta has managed to successfully relaunch his career in both Ring of Honor, PWG, and, most notably, New Japan. In the latter, he's become a 4-time IWGP Junior Heavyweight Tag Champ as part of Roppongi Vice, and if you've watched his matches, it's clear to see the talent that Barreta has. A talent which WWE never really allowed him to showcase. Barreta looks like a man who's very much enjoying his wrestling once again, and you could argue that he may not be in any immediate rush to return to WWE and change that. However, if Trent was to opt for a return to the company, then perhaps the styles and skills he's developed would be more tailored to fit the bill on either NXT or 205 Live, where the focus would be much more on his in-ring ability rather than his dude-busting abilities on the main roster. Number 6, Matt Sidell. When he surprisingly pinned Chris Jericho at WWE's Fatal 4-Way pay-per-view in June 2010, the future looked so very bright for the Evan-born character that Matt Sidell was portraying on WWE TV. That win was supposed to elevate the high flyer, but in fact, it ended up being a bit of a false dawn. The next 4 years were all over the place for Sidell. In between wellness policy suspensions and injuries, he formed the Air Boom tag team with Kofi Kingston, then spent a year on the sidelines before being released from his contract in 2014. Sidell would return to the independent scene, enjoying stints at Ring of Honor, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, and New Japan, before eventually returning to Impact Wrestling in 2016. 2017. There's never been a question about Sidell's ability. His matches rarely disappoint, but perhaps there could still be question marks over his fitness and potential wellness policy hurdles. Sidell's latest injury came as recently as this year, picking up a knee injury at the start of January, and just under 2.5 years prior, he was arrested in Japan and convicted under suspicion of marijuana smuggling, which, as I'm sure you can probably imagine, is the type of bad publicity that just wouldn't fly in WWE. Still, if Matt can keep himself fit and avoid any further legal discrepancies, you could see him being a perfect fit for the 205 Live roster. Now yes, that might not sound like a good thing, but with Mustafa Ali graduating to the main roster and the overall stigma of the brand slowly but surely changing, you can't tell me you wouldn't enjoy watching Sidell tear it up against WWE Cruiserweight Champion Buddy Murphy. Number 5, John Morrison. Now listen, this ain't no make-believe. It might be a tough sell for WWE to try and lure John Morrison, Nitro, Mundo, Impact back into the mix in 2019, but they should damn well try. Currently the reigning Impact World Champion, Morrison is still as athletic as ever and continues to maintain some name value in the wrestling world after his 2011 departure from WWE. In this particular situation, however, any chance of a return would hinge on Morrison's own interest, not strictly that of WWE. Morrison's post-WWE life has been kind to him, and alongside successful runs in Lucha Underground and Impact, the man of a million surnames has also dabbled in the world of acting too. Deal or no deal, perhaps John Morrison might be all too happy to entertain his 40s without the rigours of a full-time schedule. But for a man with such star potential, he may well always have that question in his head, what if? Number 4, Juice Robinson. The laid-back hippie CJ Parker is a footnote in NXT history, and the gimmick was so hard to stomach for hardcore NXT fans that the brand actually had to turn him heel during his first run. When that didn't work either, Parker grew tired of the monotony and requested his release in 2015. But as luck would have it, his calling was waiting for him in Japan. There, as part of New Japan Pro Wrestling, he renamed himself Juice Robinson and has gradually managed to develop into one of the most over-gaijin babyfaces in the company. In his new role, Juice has finally found the platform to excel. His promos are incredible, and his new character oozes the type of personality and charisma that he showed glimpses of during his run in NXT, but was ultimately smothered by the restraints of the Eco Warrior gimmick. His stint in Japan has also been a huge success, with Juice becoming a 2-time IWGP United States champion, a belt which he currently holds after defeating Cody at Wrestle Kingdom 13 earlier this year. Now, as you can imagine, impressed by Juice's evolution away from the company, the Wrestling Observer claimed late last year that Robinson was back on WWE's radar, and as he bloody should be, because his improvement and development have come as the result of tremendous hard work. But if Juice's promos are anything to go by, like, for example, I don't know, the one where he subtly mentioned, "That's in the rearview mirror now, and guess what, I ain't going back, I ain't ever going back," then you might just get the very ever so slight impression that he doesn't really have any plans to head back to WWE anytime soon. Number 3, Wade Barrett. When a company manages to take a great gimmick, like Bad News Barrett, and turn it into a terrible gimmick, like King Barrett, it really is no wonder that Stu Bennett decided that enough was enough and elected to leave the following year. Despite taking time away from in-ring wrestling, Bennett has popped up in the industry multiple times, featuring as GM for both Defiant Wrestling and ITV's World of Sport Revival. And in both roles, he's reminded everybody just how excellent a promo man he really is. Not only that, but his skills as a colour commentator are hard to argue with, and while a return to WWE as a wrestler would be interesting, a return as a commentator could be just as rewarding. While he may have made the biggest impact being the bearer of bad news, any form of return for Stu Bennett in WWE could surely only be good news. Number 2, Karma. The once proud run of Awesome Kong in TNA gave way to the promises of more when WWE picked Kia Stevens up and renamed her Karma in 2010. Sadly, her career was never quite the same again. Shortly after debuting as a dominating heel, Stevens fell pregnant and had to take significant time off from wrestling. She would return briefly at the 2012 Royal Rumble, but then left the company not too long after that. While stints in Japan and a return to Impact would follow, Stevens struggled to replicate her red-hot run from before, and eventually ended up moving away from full-time wrestling to pursue other avenues. Fortunately, one of those avenues just so happened to be the Netflix series Glow, where she plays the welfare queen in a role that allows her to showcase her acting abilities while also making use of her vast wrestling experience. Now, the combination of those two elements could be the real selling point for any potential return to WWE, and if Karma could be coaxed out of semi-retirement to go back to wrestling, her quality as a more well-rounded performer could see her be the perfect opponent for any babyface looking for a challenge. Ronda Rousey, anybody? And number 1, Batista. Now, if there's one person I'd personally want to see get another run in WWE, then it's this guy. How the hell can you not love Dave goddamn Batista? Well, over to you 2014, because at the Royal Rumble that year, that was exactly the case. It was a return that had promised so much, but was ultimately tarred with negativity and Boo-tista chants, although admittedly, that was mostly as a byproduct of Dave simply not being Daniel Bryan and winning the 2014 Royal Rumble. Sadly, the experience that year left a bitter taste in Batista's mouth, and one that would take a good 4 years to wash out, as the animal wouldn't be seen on WWE TV until his return for SmackDown 1000 last year. Batista used his appearance to air some of his grievances to some extent, but one hugely notable thing was hearing and seeing how different the reaction was from the fans this time round. Maybe he'd earned their respect for his more serious roles in the likes of Spectre or Blade Runner 2049. Maybe he'd earned their love for his portrayal of Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy. Or maybe it was just the fact that Dave Batista is one of life's all-round swell guys. But whatever the reason, the WWE Universe showered the animal with love, and you could see just how much it meant to him. Not to mention the fact that he teased a match with Triple H that I didn't even know I wanted to see until I saw the two squaring off. Batista has expressed an interest in returning to the ring, but also stated it would have to be the right match, and that he'd want to go all in with it if he did, which means no part-time and all full-time. And what better way to purge the nightmare of 5 years ago than delivering one last successful WWE run to prove that the animal can still get it done.